There's a moment that tells you everything you need to know about Allen Iverson. A room full of reporters asking him about practice. Not a game, not a playoff series. Practice. And instead of giving the polished, PR-approved answer, he just doesn't. He goes somewhere raw, somewhere real.
We talking about practice. Not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice. Not a game. Not the game that I go out there and die for and play every game like it's my last. Not the game. We talking about practice, man. I mean, how silly is that?
That moment became one of the most iconic in NBA history. Not a buzzer beater, not a championship, a press conference. Because even when he was falling apart, the world couldn't look away. But here's what nobody talks about. That press conference wasn't defiance. That was a man who had already started to lose everything, and nobody around him had the courage to tell him. This is the story of the most electric human being to ever lace up basketball shoes. The rise, the culture, the chaos, and the quiet, painful collapse that followed. Before the cornrows, the tattoos, the crossovers, there was a boy in Hampton, Virginia who had every reason to give up before he ever got started. Ann Iverson was 15 when she gave birth to Allen. His father was never in the picture. Flooding houses, no heat. Food that wasn't always guaranteed. Hampton in the late 80s. Media, no YouTube. But that moment spread through barbershops and playgrounds across America like wildfire.
As a kid, Allen had bragged to his coach about taking MJ. And now, he'd finally get his chance.
When I grabbed the ball, I heard Phil Jackson yell, "Michael."
Iverson has Jordan. The crowd is into it.
I gave him a little cross to see would he bite on it. I let him set his feet, and then I stepped it back again.
Allen shakes free, gets two! Mike said no. Allen said yes. The bucket, the crowd loves it.
Because people understood instinctively, someone just checked in. His name was Allen Iverson, and people started calling him the answer. People talk about Allen Iverson as a basketball player. They keep the story inside the sport. They miss the bigger thing. Allen Iverson didn't just play basketball, he changed what was acceptable in America. The NBA in the mid-90s had spent years crafting a careful image. Clean-cut, marketable, palatable. Then Allen Iverson showed up. Cornrows, tattoos, baggy jeans, durag, looking like he'd come from the block. Because he had He didn't code switch. He didn't perform a version of himself for cameras. He refused, stubbornly, to be anyone he didn't recognize.
Love it. Love it. I don't tell nobody how to dress, man. Leave people alone, man. Let people dress and be who they are.
Express themselves
Let
how they
people
want.
be, man, what? And be comfortable.
And young people lost their minds. Kids from every background had been told to dress a certain way, talk a certain way. They looked at Allen Iverson and felt something they hadn't felt from a professional athlete before. Reebok signed him to one of the biggest sneaker deals in the league. His crossover sold shoes. His realness sold shoes. David Stern was not pleased. Shoulders. He played through all of it because the version of himself that sat out didn't exist in his imagination. But the physical punishment was manageable. What wasn't was everything surrounding it. 50, 60 people in his orbit at any given time. Friends from Hampton, family, old neighborhood guys who needed something, people he couldn't say no to because saying no meant abandoning where he came from. He was supporting people financially who weren't supporting him emotionally. Loyal to a fault. And loyalty, when it isn't returned, is just a more dignified word for exploitation. He made over $150 million. It moved through his hands like water. People around him encouraged the spending because the spending meant they were included. And nobody, not his agent, not his closest friends, ever sat him down and said, "Stop, think about tomorrow." He kept moving. Because Allen Iverson at rest made no sense. The motion was how he survived. The friction between Iverson and Larry Brown had always simmered beneath winning. When winning got harder, coexistence became impossible. Missed practices, late arrivals. And then the press conference, May 2002, after the Sixers were eliminated. Allen's close friend Rasheem Brewer had just been killed. He was grieving, and reporters were asking him about practice. That word became shorthand for every criticism of Allen Iverson: lazy, uncommitted, selfish. The clip was repeated so many times, stripped of context, that an entire generation grew up thinking he didn't care. That is one of the great injustices in the history of sports media. This was a man who played through injuries that would have sidelined others for months, who led the league in minutes while carrying a team that, without him, wasn't a playoff team. The idea that he didn't care is demonstrably, provably absurd. But the narrative had been set, and narratives, once set, are almost impossible to unset. Larry Brown left. The Sixers disassembled the roster around him. And Iverson, approaching 30, felt something he'd never felt before: powerless. Defenses were now built specifically to limit what one small guard could do. The crossover that made Jordan stumble was a known quantity. Teams had film. The element of surprise, one of his greatest weapons, was gone. He was still great, but the gap between what he had been and what he was now was real, and he could feel it even if he couldn't say it out loud. December 2006. After 11 seasons. After the MVP, the finals, the scoring titles, the 76ers traded Allen Iverson to Denver. Watch his face. The jaw tightening. Philadelphia wasn't just a team, it was identity. 11 years of blood poured into a city that loved him back with a ferocity that matched his own. He was leaving. Not by choice. Denver was supposed to be the second act. It almost worked. But something in Iverson had shifted, something quiet you can't see in a box score. Parts of seasons in Detroit, Memphis, a bittersweet return to Philadelphia. Each stop shorter, each one more off. How do you ask Allen Iverson to accept a reserve role? How do you ask someone who had never once accepted a lesser version of himself to do exactly that? You can't. He couldn't. He played his last NBA game in 2010. He was 34 years old. The years after were not peaceful. The money was gone. $150 million gone. And when you can no longer pay for 60 people, you learn fast who your friends actually are. His marriage to Tawana fell apart. Reports of drinking, erratic behavior, a man who didn't know who he was without a basketball court beneath his feet. His daughter wrote a heartbreaking letter. The empire hadn't contracted. It had collapsed. Allen Iverson's whole identity, the bravado, the fearlessness, was built for competition. He knew exactly who he was when there was a game to play. Take the game away and what's left? He didn't know. He'd never needed to know. He never asked for help. Carried it the way he'd always carried everything, alone, forward, without flinching. Even when flinching would have been the smarter, more human choice. It's easy to see only the fall. To define a man by what he lost instead of what he built, that would be a mistake. Allen Iverson changed basketball. He's the direct ancestor of the modern NBA. The guard dominated, pace and space game you watch today. Curry, Luka, the era of the 6-foot scorer who bends defenses with handles and will. That game exists because Iverson ran the proof of concept before anyone else had the courage to. He changed culture. The NBA's dress code in 2005 was a direct response to what he represented, the league trying to put a lid back on something already out. But you can't. Iverson had already won. The cornrows, the tattoos, the unapologetic identity. It had changed the country's aesthetic vocabulary in ways no policy memo could reverse. He changed what athletes are allowed to be. Before Iverson, the model for a black professional athlete was built on assimilation. Smile, code, switch, make the sponsors comfortable. After him, there was a different model. LeBron, Durant, Kyrie. Men who speak their minds and refuse to stay in the athlete lane. They are all downstream of a man who decided in 1996 he wasn't going to pretend. That matters more than any scoring title. In 2016, Allen Iverson was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. He cried. He talked about his mother, the people who believed in him, Philadelphia. He talked like a man who had spent years in the wilderness and finally arrived somewhere warm. The financial struggles hadn't fully resolved. The personal scars were still there. But something was given back that night. He was seen, fully. Not as the problem the league never knew how to manage, as Allen Iverson. Exactly who he had always been. And the crowd roared the way you cheer for someone whose full meaning only becomes clear once they're gone. Allen Iverson didn't destroy himself because he was reckless. He destroyed himself because he was completely, stubbornly, uncomplicatedly himself, in a world not built to accommodate that. The refusal to compromise that made him a cultural icon made it impossible to adapt when adaptation was the only survivable option. The loyalty that made teammates run through walls for him made him a target for everyone who knew that loyalty had no off switch. He wasn't a cautionary tale about excess. He was a cautionary tale about isolation. About what happens when the most real person in the room also has the least infrastructure around him. No financial advisors he could trust. No system for becoming something other than the answer when that role no longer existed. He gave everything, and nobody around him was equipped to help him figure out what came next. The NBA moved on. It always does. But none of the stars that followed walked in the way Allen Iverson walked in, with that specific combination of pain, joy, defiance, and love. That specific refusal to be anyone other than exactly who he was. He was bigger than the NBA. For a long, brilliant, impossible moment, bigger than the sport that housed him. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe when you're bigger than what contains you, it eventually makes you pay. He paid for it. But God, what he gave us while he did. Only the Lord can judge me. Allen Iverson.